Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We go to the phones, and Republican strategist Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning, Chad. How you doing?
Doing all right. Appreciate you joining us today. I want to start off and give you a chance to say any words, any thoughts on the passing of George H.W. Bush, former president.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think obviously Texans are particularly saddened by this loss. It's a great loss for the country. I think it's been a nice few days to see the tributes, flow in, and for the country and the world to more fully appreciate, his incredible life of public service. It's hard to think of anyone who's given more to their country than George H.W. Bush has over a very long period of time. The other person that comes to mind is John McCain. Of course, we've lost both of them now this year. Part of, I think, what is so striking about Bush 41 is just the way he lived his life, with such grace and such decency, but also with such commitment to public service, having served in so many different ways for the country, whether it be president, vice president, UN ambassador of China, member of Congress, you name it. I mean, he did it all.
Yeah.
CIA director. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that his life of service began when he enlisted. He enlisted at the age of 18. He was the youngest naval aviator in the history of the country at the time, and it was right after Pearl Harbor. And it's kind of amazing to think of people who are still alive today who lived through Pearl Harbor. But he's in some ways one of our last direct links to that horrible attack. So. This is someone who obviously had a privileged life. I think everyone recognizes that about him. But he, I think, was so committed to public service that he dedicated whatever it was, 70 years of his life to it. And I think we can all take from his example of how he lived, treated everyone with respect, was so kind and so generous. He certainly will be missed. And boy, if you look at that family, how much dedicated public service that family has given, it's an incredible legacy.
Yeah, and Matt, do you a word or a couple of words that I keep seeing, in the media, and I actually just had someone here in the studio talking about George H.W. Bush and his presidency being, I guess, undervalued at the time, or not looked as highly upon. At the moment, but that, in the years afterwards, he was much more appreciated. Do you feel the same way?
I do. I saw quite an apt description. I forget what day it was, several nights ago. I guess the night he died, the night it became public that he died. I guess it was Friday night, wasn't it? On Friday night, someone described him as our greatest one-term president. We often don't think of one-term presidents as being great. Because generally, if you're on the right track and the public supports what you're doing, you'll get reelected. And so two-term presidents are kind of in their own category. But when you look at managing, the end of the Cold War, you look at obviously fighting back against Saddam Hussein's aggression in Kuwait, doing that with tremendous skill, but also doing that with tremendous diplomatic support. I mean, a massive coalition of nations that were on board, with that effort. Obviously, the part of his legacy that remains frustrating to some extent for conservatives was his deal to raise taxes with the Democrats. I believe he did not have a Republican majority in either house through his entire 4 years, and that's pretty striking if you think about it. A president of one party never having either chamber reflecting his own party. So he had to work with the Democrats, and of course, after he promised not to raise taxes, he ultimately felt he had to. It was for the good of the country that put him in a position where he probably could not be reelected on that basis alone, and then, of course, encouraged Pat Buchanan to primary him, and that ushered in the Clinton era. So it's history is interesting when you look back at all those things. You look at Clarence Thomas, someone who served on the Supreme Court, who he nominated, who's been one of the leading conservatives on the Supreme Court for 25 years. He has a significant legacy for one term and for never having worked with Republicans in either house. It's a significant legacy. And if you look at it also, I think people have also described him as our, most prepared president. And if you look at all he did, UN ambassador, the first ambassador of China, CIA director, a member of Congress, vice president, There's probably no one in our history, going all the way back, who's been as prepared to be president of the United States as George H.W. Bush was. So, I do think his presidency is getting, a new look. I think that's a good thing. I think John Meacham's biography, which came out just a couple of years ago, I think also started some of that review, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Visiting with Matt Mackowiak. Matt, in your newsletter this morning that you sent out, and then I also saw that you had it was either maybe an editorial maybe or an op-ed and a letter out, and there have been quite a few news stories about what's going on in Tarrant County with the Tarrant County Republican Party. Talk about that a little bit. There's the starting to spring up and make waves at least statewide.
Yeah, so this is actually not a new development. It hasn't gotten the kind of attention it's gotten until really the last week or so, statewide and even nationally. But there's been an effort kind of, a little bit beneath the surface in Tarrant County by a couple precinct chairs up there to try to remove a practicing Muslim who has been appointed vice chair of the Tarrant County GOP. He was elected as a precinct chair. He's a two-term councilman from South Lake. He's a trauma surgeon. He's a respected member of the community. And look, Chad, I don't know how to say it other than this. You have a couple of people who are clearly bigoted, who don't believe a Muslim should be in a leadership position in the Republican Party. And I had heard that there had been some talk about that over time. I didn't ever think it was all that significant or all that serious of a threat, but I saw again that there was a real effort to push it by a person up there that really wants to keep pushing it, and that in fact the county party was expected to vote on it at their January meeting. So I just decided to write a letter, which I did, to the county chair. I did also make it available to some media in Austin and in Fort Worth, and it did get a lot of attention. I think it began a discussion. There's no religious test to be a Republican. If people have questions about the religion of Islam, the questions about Sharia, I think some of that is reasonable, particularly the question of whether an Islam believes Sharia law it comes before the U.S. Constitution. In this case, that doesn't apply to Dr. Sharif. He has said he doesn't practice Sharia, doesn't believe in it. He's sworn an oath to the Constitution and the Republican Party of Texas platform. He's a respected member of the community. And so, I just felt like this is a disgusting, bigoted effort that a couple people are pushing. And the good news is that I haven't been a voice in the wilderness. I haven't been out there all alone. I mean, ever since I took that action, I think on Tuesday, I think maybe it was Wednesday of last week, we've seen Land Commissioner George P. Bush say something similar, outgoing Speaker of that Texas House, Joe Strauss. And perhaps most encouragingly, the State Republican Executive Committee, the 62 members who basically serve as the board of the Republican Party of Texas, passed a unanimous resolution on Saturday in Austin, supporting Dr. Sharif and opposing this effort. So, look, we got to be a big tent party. It doesn't mean we want Democrats. It doesn't mean we want people who don't support the Constitution or support the Republican Party of Texas platform. But this, to me, was so clearly a bigoted effort that we had to stand up and be clear about where we stand. And that's certainly what I try to do in my own way.
Yeah, and obviously the Austin American-Statesman, they had a piece about this. The Texas GOP delivers rebuke after challenge to Muslim Party official. So obviously the state party is getting involved in this, and it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward on this vote in Tarrant County. And listen, if you're, those who are in Tarrant County, they have to view this. It's not like Tarrant County is the most red county in the state now. This probably doesn't help the views of the Republican Party in Tarrant County, right?
No, that's exactly right. And look, I mean, I think this has gotten some attention, but I think what would get more attention is if they had a very, very, very strong vote rejecting this resolution. I think that would be a very good thing. But to your point, and I mentioned that in my letter to the Tarrant County GOP chair last week, and part of me, Chad, I looked at this and I said, look, Travis County had a tough election night. Tarrant County had a tough election night. So I sort of felt like I had some credibility to approach a county that's turning in the other direction to say, listen, we got to do the things that are important. Making our party smaller, making our party appear racist and bigoted is not how you do that. And so let's get focused on the next election cycle, on recruiting candidates, on rebuilding our party, on growing the party. That's what it has to be about.
Yeah.
And anyone who's not about that is effectively helping the other side, whether they are doing it intentionally or not.
Yeah. Before I let you go, and I was commenting on this before you came on, the Bill and Hillary speaking tour, it doesn't look like it's going so well. Should this be a message to Hillary Clinton that Americans, even Democrats are the only people who would turn out to this thing, that people have just had enough of her, that it's time to exit the stage? Everyone's done with you. They're not even showing up for $11 to see you speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hadn't seen, initially when that tour was announced, which is, I think, U.S. and Canada, I forget how many dates they're doing, but they're doing these conversations together. It looked to me like a little bit of a money grab. This is a couple, I think, that's earned over $200 million in the last 15 years doing public speaking, paid speaking. So it looked to me like another sort of money grab. But yeah, Maureen Dowd in the New York Times, who's been really kind of relentless about the Clintons for many years, made an effort to go to Toronto to see them speak, and she was pretty direct in talking about what a mess it was and how they had to cut prices, and there were a lot of empty seats. So look, I guess it could. What I think it shows, Chad, is that maybe the audience in Toronto is not there. But you're right. Look, there's weak support for Hillary. There's weak support among Democrats for her running again. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. I tend to think she probably won't, because I don't think the money would be there. There are too many sort of Democrats already making moves, and there's just not much appetite for another Hillary Clinton presidential campaign, I don't think.
Yeah. Matt, tell folks about your podcast and how they can sign up for your newsletter.
Absolutely, thanks. So the podcast is called Mac on Politics. We just finished our 111th episode. I think we're at 150 5-star reviews in the iTunes store. Most recent episode is with Garrett Graff. Garrett is a biographer for Robert Mueller, and he wrote a fascinating new piece in Wired magazine. And so we talked about the latest developments in the Mueller inquiry, and I know a lot of your listeners have questions about, why it's continuing to go on and what it means. And so we wanted to have a smart conversation about what's happening and where the story's going. You can find that in Stitcher and at mackonpoliticspodcast.com. The newsletter, as I mentioned every week, is called Must Read Texas. We have more than 3,000 Texas subscribers. We take all the news, put it in one clean, easy-to-read email, and deliver it by 9 a.m. every weekday morning. You can sign up for a free 1-week trial at mustreadtexas.com.
All right, very good. Matt, as always, appreciate your time. We'll visit with you next week.
Look forward to it. Have a great week. Take care.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak.